Let's now write the remaining part of our test. So after our assertion, we're going to create our request. So response this post JSON, and we calling root product store image. We are passing this product ID, and we are sending file with our image 1. So this is our oops, I've done something wrong. That shouldn't be curly braces. It should be an array. Okay, so we're sending our first image. And the first thing I'm going to do is to refetch the assets of the product. So product equals this product. We want the fresh copy of the product together with the assets relationship. And then what we're going to do is this assert count. This time we expect one asset to be available to us, this product asset. Our product should now have one image. So first asset equals this product assets, and we want the first one. It should be the only one there. And what we're going to do next? Next, we are going to do the assertion on the database. So this assert database has in, sorry, not response first. This assert response is going to be created with JSON. So created, which is status code for the created response is 2 or 1. We're passing the response to it. This is one of those helpers. And then we are expecting to receive ID 1, which is basically data representing the new asset. Then we're going to have name is what we're also expecting to get, which will be image.jpg, obviously reflecting what we sent. And then we have extension should be represented by JPEG format. And then we have URL, which should be, let's get this instance of the first asset URL. Then we're going to have variants, which will be represented by first asset variants. And then we're going to have a field in this response, which will represent all of the items that needs to be preloaded before we show them in the browser. And this upload, excuse me, this upload, let me just open, oops, not this one, file browser, resources, file upload. You'll see that we have this preload method here. So basically when we receive the response, we then sending it to the process method. That method checks if there are any preload items within the preload index. If there are, then we're going to run it on the promise, through the promise basically. Once the image has preloaded, then we resolve it, and obviously all promises, depending on how many images we are sending through, then we'll be able to call the callback and obviously process next upload and so on. So if there are any items to be preloaded, so we will expect the preload index and preload will refer to this preload method, and we pass first asset instance to it. Now we don't have this method yet, and we will have it, but it's going to come rather than from this class directly, this test class directly, it's going to come from the trait. Let's create this trait first under the tests. I'm just going to close these directories. Traits, I'm going to create a new trait called AssetTrait, and it is a trait. There we go. So this one will have this method called preload. So it's going to be protected because it's only needed for any classes that are actually using this trait. So preload, and it will take an asset instance. Let's just import this class. and it will return array. Get asset preloads. And here we are going to first check if empty asset variance, then we're going to return an empty array. Now you might be thinking, okay, so these are variants, but what about the main URL of the image that actually has been uploaded, not the variants? Why are we returning an empty array? This image should also be preloaded. And you would be right, but the only time that we're going to have variants is when we are having the image. If the file type is different than an image, there won't be any variants there. So if it's a JPEG, even if you don't specify any breakpoints for the variants, it will always save the variants as JSON for each of the breakpoints, even if it's referring the same image as the original rather than the converted formatted one. So there are no variants. That means that the file you are dealing with is not of an image type. Okay, so now we're going to do something like URLs. We're going to collect them all. So array, merge, we're going to go for, we start with asset and its main URL, which I've just mentioned. So the main image, which we want to preload as well. And then array map. We're going to use a function. There we go. And this one will use array of variants. Sorry, it's going to be variant with each iteration. And we are passing to it as a second argument asset and its variants. And here what we're going to return is variant URL. Because variants will be returned as arrays, we need to obviously refer to each index in the array manner. Okay, so now we have these URLs. We're going to return array values URLs. There we go, because we don't want the indexes that come with the variants, because variants will have indexes like, say, SM, and then we're going to have path and URL with associated value and so on. So we want to get rid of those indexes SM and so on, because the first one will be numerical for this asset URL. We want them all to be numerical from 0 to 4. So sorry, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's right. I was scared to count on my fingers. Okay, so there you go. So that's our preload method. We're going to get back to this AssetTrait in just a moment. So if we scroll back to our test, we need to obviously use this trait now. So AssetTrait, there we go. And now it's no longer highlighted. Right, so back to our test. So after this, we've checked that the response is correct. We know that there is one asset already associated with the product model. Next thing is we need to determine whether the file actually exists. So storage, assert exists, and we're going to go for first asset, and we pass the path to it. Then next thing is going to be this, assert equals storage URL. When we pass first asset path, needs to be equal to first asset URL. So our method, our accessor or getter on the asset, it's URL methods or accessor, obviously there's a property here, should return the same URL as storage URL using the path. Here obviously we are also using a disk, but because this storage fake, we didn't specify any disk here, so we're just using this storage URL. That should equal, it should return the same value. Okay, so that's this one, and now it's time to check the database for the existence of the record. So this assert database has, and we're looking for assets database, which should now have record with the ID 1, because the first asset, then it's going to be assetable ID should be of our product, this product and its ID. Then assetable type should be product class, product model class. Then the type should be of the image, so image assets type image class. Then for the disk, we are expecting this to be a file system contract public visibility, so that's what we should receive. Sorry, disk ROM. Disk, this is for the visibility. Disk should also be public, because that's what we, if I just split the screen, that's what we set it for this particular test suite. So it needs to be public, and then visibility should be this public visibility as well. And then sort, it should be, it's a first file, so it should be 1. Then we should have path, should be represented by a first asset path. Then we should have original name, should be image JPG. Come on, JPG. Then we should have MIME type, which should be image JPEG. Then size should be first asset size. And then caption, we're going to set the file name, the original file name, so image.jpg. And variants should be this, and then again method, which we don't have yet, variants first asset, and that should be in a JSON format, so to JSON. That's what our database should store. Now we don't have this variants method yet, so let's quickly go to our AssetTrait and let's create it. So protected function variants, we take asset as first argument, and a second argument we're going to take boolean true or false, so boolean, which will be represented by same variable. By default it will be set to false. And what this will do, I'll show in just a moment. It will return collection, Illuminate support collection, get asset variants. So here, first of all, I'm going to explain what this same does in just a moment, because we don't have implementation of this whole process yet. So I'm going to have to explain as we go. We're going to check first if empty asset variants, then we are going to return an empty collection. So return new collection. Otherwise, we're going to check for the methods. And here we check if same is set to true, then the method name will be same variant. Otherwise, we're going to use prefixed variant. And this is where the situation what I explained earlier comes into play, where we have variants which are pointing to the same file as the original file, basically. This will be the case when we didn't have to create the alternative version of the originally uploaded file. So let's say we only have one file, we're uploading the image, but we don't want to crop it, we don't want to change the colors or anything like this. We want just a single image, nothing else. So in that case, we're going to create variants, but they will point to the same image. Okay, so now we return and we collect our breakpoints, which we don't have yet. So let's quickly create them as well. They will be on the assets, I believe. Just a second. No, they won't be on the assets. They will be actually on the completely new namespace, which will be called processor. Processors, actually multiple processors, and we're going to have an image one. This is where all our code for processing the image is going to be later on stored. So image, and we're going to have breakpoints. Breakpoints. There we go. And within these breakpoints, we're going to start with the with the abstract breakpoint class. Breakpoint, come on. Breakpoint. And that is a class. It's just going to be an abstract one. And here what we're going to have three properties. Public, which will be represented by either null or integer, called width. By default, we're going to set it to null. Let's just add dog blocks. Then we're going to have public, by default, integer as well. Height. And also null set straight away, so we don't have any problems when we want to use any methods without instantiating the class, because those typed properties would cause the problem if we started using any classes that will extend this one without actually using a constructor. That's why we need to associate null with the property straight away. Public closure, this time we're going to use is going to be called process. And by default, no. Now this process, again, this will become a little bit more clear later on. But this process, what it will allow us to do is to specify process specifically for this breakpoint. So let's say if one of the images within the variants that we're going to generate, we would like to flip the image horizontally or vertically, we will be able to do this on just this single variation of the image, rather than just specifying, let's say, process for the entire batch of the images or variants for a given image. I know it might sound a little bit crazy at the moment, but yeah, believe me, it will make more sense a little bit later on. It gives us a lot of flexibility here. So again, this will be the closure or null. We're going to start with the constructor, and we will only take width and height, but the first one, I will not specify its type. I'm not going to type hint it. I will, however, make sure that it's by default null. So what I'm going to do here is also use closure as its argument. So it might be a closure, integer, or null. And this second one we can only be integer. By default is going to be null, but I'm not going to use this question mark because I don't want to be forced to specify the null if I don't want to use it. Okay, so now we're going to check if width is instance of closure. Then what we're going to do is use this process equals width, because that means that the width represents the process, in which case we don't need width and height because the process will already have all the whole function that will execute whatever needs to be done on this given breakpoint. Else we are going to use width and height for the image, so we can resize it however we want. So that's this, and the last thing we need on this breakpoint abstract class is the declaration of the abstract public function index, and that was going to return a string. So let's just add some doc blocks and get index name. So now I think we've got everything on this one. Yeah, we can save and close this file. Now let's create those breakpoints that we actually need. So we are going to have breakpoint for a small screen. So it's going to be small, the first one. And that extends breakpoint. Let's add this method stub index, and that's going to return SM for the index. And let's use inherit docs, and I'm just going to copy this method. Then we're going to go for medium and extend breakpoint. Let's add this method. This time is going to be MD. Then we're going to have large, extends breakpoint, and it's going to represent LG. Then we're going to have extra large, and you can create as many as you really need for your application. I think these 4 will be enough for now, but if you need more, feel free to obviously add more. XL, Large was LG. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so now we have these breakpoints. What I want to do now is from within this variance method, I will need to list them also. New small, new medium, because I need to iterate through all of those breakpoints. New large and new extra large. And now what I want to do is flat map through them, which means we are going to provide the key and the value from within the callback function. It's going to be represented by the breakpoint, because obviously each of this class is an instance of the breakpoint. Let me actually just put it on new line here. Flat map, that's all we're returning. And we need to use the methods. So use method. And here we're going to return array. We take the breakpoint and its index as the key. And then we are going to do this method, which we are going to use. And we pass breakpoint as first argument to it, and then asset as the second, which we also, yeah, I didn't pass it through. So let's use it as a first argument, say asset. Okay, and semicolon here. So that method is completed, but obviously we need the same variant and prefix variance method, which we don't have yet. So this can be private functions. So same variant, it will take breakpoint as the first one, and then asset, which will be instance of the asset. And it will return array. So get variant with the path to the original file. So all these variants for each of these breakpoints will return the reference to the original file URL. So here we're going to return path, asset, path, and then we're going to have URL, because that's what I'm going to expect from each variant. It's going to be index, which is SM, for instance, for small, and then equals and the array of path and URL. So the full URL to the file, and then the path if we need to remove it, obviously using storage facade. Asset, URL. So that will be very simple with the same variant. Now for the prefix variant, however, we're going to use slightly different approach. So private again function, let's just copy it, name. We're going to again to take breakpoint, and then asset. Now, do you know what? We don't actually need this breakpoint here, so we might do something different. We might take asset as the first one and breakpoint as the second one, in which case we're not gonna need it here at all. So I need to swap these arguments here. And the same goes with this one. So asset as the first one, oops, and breakpoint as the second one, which is available. We just don't use it in the second method, so we don't have to have it here. Array, and here we're going to say get breakpoint prefixed variant. Okay, so we're going to start with path, which will equal path info of the asset path, and then we're going to have URL. Again, path info of the asset, but URL. And now what we're going to do is create the, actually let's do it straight on the file equals breakpoint index. We're going to concatenate it with the hyphen and then path base name. Now, what does this do? We want to generate the new file name. We want to use the original file name, but prefix it with the hyphen, and right before this, the index. So for instance, if our file is called index.jpg, I want this to become, for the small breakpoint, sm-index.jpg. For large will be lg-index.jpg, because we need to save these files later on to the server as separate files. So now what we're going to do is return path again. It's going to be, oops, path is going to be path, and we take dir name, so dir name. Again, if you are not familiar with path info, obviously navigate to PHP documentation, and you can read all about it, what it's going to return. Obviously, by using this path info on the path to the file, you can obtain a directory name, name of the file using base, name extension, and the file name, and so on and so on, without the extension. So that's what this path info does. So dir name, we're going to concatenate it with the / and then file name. And then for the URL, we are going to have URL, dir name as well. So this obviously dir name will not have the file name at all. And then the file we are appending to it, the new one, with obviously prefixed with the index of the breakpoint and the hyphen. Okay, so that's everything within our traits. Our prefix variant, sum variant are all implemented. We can now save and close this. Our test method isn't finished yet, so we're going to finish writing this test, and then in the next video we actually start working on the implementation to make sure that this test passes. So we've checked that. Now the next one, I'm going to use the same response, but this time we're going to send the second image 2. And what we are expecting, again, we need to, I'm going just to copy this. We're going to have 2 assets, second product. Okay, let's just use this. So actually, let's copy all this. And let's change it. So now we should have 2 assets. And it should have now, rather than first assets, I'm going to have second asset. And it should be assets. Sort by descending by sort field, and we want the first item then, because if it's in the descending order by sort, then the first item will be the last one added. And here we're going to have ID 2. It should be image 2 with PNG extension, because the second image is PNG. And then we should have here second asset for URL variants and second asset for the preload. Then we're gonna go for asset exist first path, so it didn't remove the previous image because we're going to allow multiple images. I'll show you later on how to also allow only a single image upload, but that's a little bit later on. And then we also expect the second image to also exist. And the next one we're going to have that. First one, we're going to have assert not equals first asset. We're gonna go for URL. Shouldn't equal the same as second asset URL. They should be different, just to make sure they didn't overwrite the image. Then assert equals storage second asset path with second asset URL. When it's wrapped, the path wrapped with storage URL, that should be the same. And then within the assets, we should have ID2 product as well, image, public, and public visibility. Now the sort should be 2, path should be second, image should be 2 PNG. MIME for this type should be PNG, image PNG. Then we have second asset size, image 2 for caption.png, and for variants we should have second asset to JSON. And that's our test completed. Obviously, if I run this test now, it's going to fail because we don't have the implementation yet within our controller. If I try and run this without exception handling, we're gonna see what's actually causing this problem, and that's going to be, well, it doesn't tell us actually in this particular case. No, it doesn't tell us. Okay, so yeah, we're going to work on the implementation which will make all this to pass in the following videos.